The scent of freshly cut grass always reminds me of the summer when everything changed. It's not the kind of change you'd expect from a life that, from the outside, looked like it was framed in a Norman Rockwell painting. My name is Susan, and I'm 38, living in a quaint suburban home that's the epitome of the American dream. Or so it seemed. I share this life with my husband, Mark, an engineer who's 45 and has the kind of dedication to his work that often leaves him coming home late. His mind still tangled in equations and blueprints. We've been married for 10 years, a decade that's seen its share of laughter and tears, but always somehow we've managed to keep our ship steady, even if the waters got a bit choppy at times. Then there's Alex, Mark's son from a previous marriage. He's 23, just back from college, and he's like a puzzle I've never quite figured out. With his quiet demeanor, he's always been a bit of an enigma, spending hours in the garage, his hands covered in grease, working on some mechanical project or another. His passion for machines is as intense as his silence is profound. Our home, nestled in this picture-perfect neighborhood, is alive with the sounds of suburban life. The hum of the lawnmower, the distant laughter of neighbors enjoying their backyards, and the occasional clatter from the garage where Alex tinkers away. It's a symphony of normalcy, a soundtrack to a life that on the surface seems utterly unremarkable. But beneath this veneer of tranquility, there's a current, an undercurrent of something unspoken, something that's been simmering just below the surface. You see, Mark's late nights aren't just about work. There have been times when the scent of another woman's perfume lingered on his collar, a silent confession of his indiscretions. And Alex, with his brooding presence, seems to know more than he lets on, his eyes often catching mine with a look that's both knowing and distant. I've tried to keep our home a sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the outside world can't touch us. Yet, as I stand in our kitchen, the morning light casting long shadows across the room, I can't shake the feeling that something is about to disrupt this fragile peace. It's not just the small, spicy moments of tension between Mark and me, those whispered arguments that end with a kiss, a promise to do better, or the occasional heated embrace that speaks of both passion and frustration. No, it's something else, something larger looming on the horizon. As I pour myself another cup of coffee, the aroma mingling with the morning air, I glance out the window. Alex is in the garage, his silhouette framed against the light, working on what looks like an old motorcycle. There's a determination in his movements, a focus that's almost palpable. And then there's the neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who's always too eager to chat, her eyes lingering a bit too long on Mark when he's out mowing the lawn. Her husband, a man of few words, watches from the porch, his gaze heavy with unspoken accusations. This morning, as I watch Alex, I realize that our lives are not just about the routine, the mundane. There's a narrative unfolding, one that's about to take a turn into the unknown. The answer, I fear, is already here, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. And as I sip my coffee, the warmth doing little to dispel the chill of anticipation, I know that the next chapter of our story is about to begin. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over our backyard, Mark returned home unusually early, complaining of a headache. His face was drawn, his usual sharp eyes dulled by pain. After dinner, he took some painkillers and retired to bed early, leaving me to clean up. The house was quiet, save for the soft clinking of dishes and the distant sound of Alex tinkering in the garage. Feeling restless, I decided to check on Alex, curious about what he was always working on. The garage door creaked as I opened it, revealing a scene that was almost otherworldly. Alex was surrounded by an array of tools, his face lit by the harsh light of a work lamp. He was assembling something intricate, his hands moving with a precision that was almost mesmerizing. "Want to see what I'm working on?" Alex asked, his voice breaking the silence. I nodded, stepping closer, the smell of oil and metal filling my senses. He was working on what appeared to be a complex piece of machinery, gears and wires spread out like a spider's web. "It's a project from college," he explained, his fingers delicately adjusting a small component. A robotic arm designed to mimic human movement with precision. I've been tweaking it to be more responsive. The complexity of his work was impressive, yet there was something more, something unspoken in his tone. His eyes, usually so guarded, seemed to flicker with a hidden intensity. As I watched him work, I couldn't help but wonder about the secrets this garage held. Was it just mechanical projects? Or was there something else? Something tied to the undercurrents of tension I felt in our home? Alex paused, his gaze lifting to meet mine. You know, sometimes I think I understand more than I let on, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I felt a chill, not from the cool evening air, but from the weight of his words. What did he know? What had he seen or heard? He continued, I see things, Susan. Things that might change how we see everything. His hands stilled on the machinery, the silence between us growing heavy. The implications of his words hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truths in our lives. Mark's late nights, the scent of another woman's perfume, the quiet arguments, and the heated reconciliations. Alex's knowledge seemed to bridge the gap between the facade of our perfect suburban life and the reality beneath. I wanted to ask him more, to delve into what he meant, but the moment felt too fragile, like a soap bubble that might burst with the wrong word. Instead, I simply watched him, his silhouette against the backdrop of his mechanical creation, a symbol of both his isolation and his connection to our family's secrets. The evening deepened, the shadows in the garage growing longer, mirroring the shadows in my mind. Alex returned to his work, the rhythmic sound of his tools against metal filling the space. I stood there, a silent observer, contemplating the layers of our lives, the stories we told ourselves, and the ones we hid from each other. As I turned to leave, Alex's voice stopped me. Susan, sometimes the truth isn't just about what's visible. It's about what's hidden in plain sight. His words echoed in my mind as I walked back to the house, the chill of anticipation now a constant companion. The next chapter of our story was indeed beginning, and I had a feeling that Alex, with his quiet observations and mechanical prowess, would play a pivotal role in its unfolding. I followed Alex into the garage, where he showed me his latest project, a custom motorcycle. His enthusiasm was infectious, and as he explained the mechanics, I found myself drawn into his world. The garage, with its smell of oil and metal, felt like a different universe, one where time seemed to stand still. As we talked, the conversation shifted from tools to life, from dreams to desires. There was an undeniable chemistry, a spark that neither of us had anticipated. Before we knew it, the line between a friendly chat and something more intimate blurred. The affair was not planned, but it happened, right there among the tools and the shadows of the garage. The next morning, guilt weighed heavily on me. I couldn't look Mark in the eye without feeling a surge of shame. Alex, too, seemed different, quieter, as if the weight of our secret was too much to bear alone. How long can this secret remain hidden? The days that followed were a blur of routine and pretense. I went through the motions of my daily life, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that night in the garage over and over. Alex and I avoided each other, the tension palpable whenever we were in the same room. One evening, as Mark was working late again, I found myself drawn back to the garage. Alex was there, his silhouette against the dim light, working on the motorcycle with a focus that seemed almost desperate. Hey, I said softly, stepping inside. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of guilt and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Hey, he replied, his voice low. We stood there in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. I'm sorry, I finally said, breaking the silence. I didn't mean for things to go that far. Alex set down his wrench, wiping his hands on a rag. Neither did I, he admitted. But it happened, and now we have to deal with it. I nodded, feeling the weight of our shared secret. Does Mark suspect anything? Alex shook his head. I don't think so. But we need to be careful. This could destroy everything. The gravity of his words hit me. Our family, our life, everything we had built could crumble because of one moment of weakness. We should talk about this, I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. Figure out what to do next. He agreed, and we sat on the old couch in the corner of the garage, the same couch where our indiscretion had taken place. The irony wasn't lost on me. As we talked, I realized how much Alex had grown to mean to me, not just as Mark's son, but as someone I genuinely cared about. His insights into our family dynamics, his quiet observations, they all painted a picture of a young man who understood far more than he let on. We can't let this happen again, I said firmly, though my heart wasn't entirely in my words. I know, Alex replied, his gaze dropping to the floor. But Susan, there's something you should know. I braced myself, expecting the worst. I've been keeping something else from you. It's about Mark. My heart skipped a beat. What about him? He's not just working late. I've seen him, Susan. He's been meeting someone. A woman. The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. Mark's late nights, the perfume, it all made sense now. But hearing it from Alex, it felt like betrayal squared. How long have you known? I asked, my voice trembling. A few months. I didn't want to say anything because I thought it might just be a phase. Or maybe I was wrong. But after what happened between us, I felt you deserved to know. The complexity of our situation deepened. Here we were, entangled in our own web of deceit, while Mark was weaving his own. We're all just hiding things from each other, I murmured, more to myself than to Alex. Yeah, he agreed, his voice heavy with regret. But maybe it's time we start being honest. Not just with each other, but with ourselves. The conversation left me with more questions than answers. If Mark was having an affair, where did that leave us? Where did that leave me? As I left the garage, the night air felt colder, the stars less bright. The next chapter of our story was indeed unfolding, and it was fraught with secrets, lies, and the daunting prospect of truth. I walked back to the house, each step heavy with the burden of what I now knew. The chill of anticipation was now a constant companion, not just for what might happen between Alex and me, but for the revelations that were sure to come. The house was silent when I entered, Mark's absence palpable. I poured myself a glass of wine, sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, contemplating the layers of our lives, the stories we told ourselves, and the ones we hid from each other. And as I sipped the wine, the taste bitter on my tongue, I knew that the truth, whatever it might be, was about to come crashing into our lives, shattering the fragile peace we had maintained. The next chapter was indeed beginning, and I had a feeling that none of us would emerge unchanged. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house grew palpable. Mark, sensing something amiss, became more attentive, trying to bridge the gap he felt forming between us. His eyes would linger on me longer, his questions more probing, as if he was searching for something he couldn't quite grasp. Meanwhile, Alex and I were like two magnets, pulled together by an invisible force, yet knowing the consequences could be catastrophic. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner, Mark announced he was going to bed early again. The moment he left the room, Alex and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement that it was time to confront the truth. I followed him to the garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal greeting me as I stepped inside. Alex was working on his motorcycle, his movements precise and focused, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the weight of our secret pressing down on me. He set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag. "I know," he replied, his voice low, mirroring the gravity of our situation. We sat on the old couch, the same one where our indiscretion had unfolded. The irony was not lost on me. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my heart pounding with the fear of what lay ahead. Alex looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "We need to tell him, Susan. We can't keep living like this." The thought of confessing to Mark, of watching his world crumble because of our actions, was terrifying. But how? How do we even begin to explain this? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We tell him the truth. About us, about what we've done, and about what I've seen." I felt a chill, not just from the cool night air seeping into the garage, but from the implications of his words. "What have you seen, Alex?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor before meeting mine again. "I've seen Mark with another woman. Not just once, Susan. It's been going on for a while." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Mark's late nights, the scent of another woman's perfume. It all made a horrific kind of sense. My heart ached with betrayal, but there was also a strange relief in knowing I wasn't alone in my deceit. "We're all just hiding things from each other," I murmured, the realization heavy in my chest. "Yeah," Alex agreed, his voice heavy with regret. "But maybe it's time we start being honest. Not just with each other, but with ourselves." The silence that followed was thick with the weight of our decisions. The garage, usually a place of creation and escape, now felt like a confessional, a space where the truth was about to be laid bare. "We should do it together," I said finally, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "We owe him that much." Alex nodded, his expression one of solemn agreement. "Tomorrow night, after dinner, we'll sit him down and tell him everything." The plan was set, but the fear of what would come next was overwhelming. Would Mark forgive us? Could our family survive this? Or would this confession be the final nail in the coffin of our seemingly perfect life? As I walked back to the house, the night air felt colder, the stars less bright. The next chapter of our story was indeed unfolding, fraught with secrets, lies, and the daunting prospect of truth. Inside, the house was silent, Mark's absence palpable. I poured myself a glass of wine, sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, contemplating the layers of our lives, the stories we told ourselves, and the ones we hid from each other. And as I sipped the wine, the taste bitter on my tongue, I knew that the truth, whatever it might be, was about to come crashing into our lives, shattering the fragile peace we had maintained. The next chapter was indeed beginning, and I had a feeling that none of us would emerge unchanged. The anticipation of the confrontation was like a storm brewing on the horizon, dark and inevitable. Tomorrow night, under the guise of a normal family dinner, we would unleash the tempest, and there was no telling what would remain standing when the winds had passed. The next morning, with Mark still asleep, Alex and I sat him down at the kitchen table. The air was thick with tension as we confessed everything. Mark's face went from confusion to disbelief, then to a cold, hard anger. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His silence was deafening. "I need some time alone," Mark finally said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his turmoil. He left the house, and in the silence that followed, Alex and I knew our lives had changed forever. The fallout from our revelation was immediate. The house felt like a different place, the walls echoing with the absence of Mark's presence. Alex and I barely spoke, the weight of our confession hanging between us like a thick fog. I spent the day in a daze, moving through the motions of life without really feeling anything. The sun rose and set, but inside our home time seemed to stand still. I kept expecting Mark to walk through the door, to confront us, to yell, to cry, to do something, but he didn't return. That evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Alex broke the silence. "We've got to figure out what to do next," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, as if speaking louder might shatter the fragile peace we were clinging to. I nodded, feeling the weight of our actions. "We've hurt him deeply," I replied, my voice catching. "And ourselves. What we did. It was wrong, Alex." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and determination. "I know, but we can't change what happened. We can only decide how we move forward from here." The next few days were a blur of waiting. Waiting for Mark to come back, waiting for some sign of what was to come. Alex spent more time in the garage, his projects now a refuge from the reality we faced. I found myself wandering through the house, touching things that Mark had touched, as if trying to hold on to the fragments of our life before everything changed. Then one afternoon Mark returned. He didn't come through the front door with his usual energy. Instead, he entered quietly, his face drawn and his eyes tired. We were in the living room, Alex and I, when he walked in. The room felt smaller, the air heavier with his presence. "I've been thinking," Mark started, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "I need to know everything. Not just what you told me, but why." Alex and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement to be completely honest. We sat down and I began, my voice trembling slightly. "It wasn't planned, Mark. Just happened. We were both feeling lost, disconnected, and in a moment of weakness." Mark held up a hand, stopping me. "I don't need the details, Susan. I need to understand why you felt that way. Why neither of you came to me." The room was silent for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall, a relentless reminder of time passing. Alex spoke next, his voice steady. "I've seen you, Dad. With her. I thought maybe you were happier, that maybe you didn't need us anymore. And Susan, she was just there, and I." Mark's face softened slightly, but the pain was still evident. "I see," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you, Susan?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my next words. I felt alone, Mark. You were always working late, and when you were here, you were distant. I thought maybe you were looking for something I couldn't give you. And then with Alex, there was this connection, this understanding that I hadn't felt in a long time. Mark listened, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he spoke. I've made mistakes too. I've been seeing someone, yes. But it wasn't because I didn't love you or want our family. It was because I felt like I was losing you both. And I didn't know how to fix it. The admission hung in the air, a confession that mirrored our own. The room was filled with the heavy scent of regret and the faint hope of reconciliation. We need to decide what we want, Mark continued, his gaze moving between Alex and me. Do we want to try and rebuild this family, or do we let it fall apart? The question was like a physical blow. I looked at Alex, seeing the same turmoil in his eyes that I felt. I want to try, I said, my voice firm. I want to fix what we've broken. Alex nodded, his agreement silent but clear. Mark looked at us, his decision weighing on him. Then we start by being honest, all of us. No more secrets. No more hiding. The conversation that followed was raw, filled with apologies, promises, and the tentative steps towards healing. We agreed to counseling, to open communication, to try and rebuild the trust that had been shattered. As the night deepened, we sat together, not as a perfect family, but as three people committed to making things right. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance that we might emerge from this storm, not unchanged, but perhaps stronger, more aware of each other's needs and fears. The house, once a symbol of our perfect life, now held the promise of a new beginning, one built on the ruins of our past mistakes. And as I looked at Mark and Alex, I realized that sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, was the only path to redemption. In the weeks that followed, Mark moved out, initiating divorce proceedings. The house, once filled with the sounds of a family, now echoed with emptiness. Alex and I, bound by our secret and now by necessity, started living together. It wasn't easy. The shadow of betrayal loomed large over us. The neighborhood, once a place of comfort, now felt like a stage where we were the main actors in a drama everyone was watching. Whispers followed us when we went out, and the eyes of our neighbors seemed to carry judgment. Mrs. Thompson, who had always been too eager to chat, now offered only tight-lipped smiles, her curiosity about our situation palpable. We tried to build something new from the ruins of the old, but the guilt, the judgment from friends, and the whispers of the community made every step forward a struggle. Yet in each other, we found a strange solace, a shared understanding of the complexities of human emotions. The days were filled with awkward silences and forced conversations. Alex, who had always been the quiet one, now seemed even more withdrawn, his time spent in the garage, his sanctuary, working on his projects with a fervor that spoke of his need to escape the reality we faced. I, on the other hand, found myself wandering through the house, touching the places where Mark's presence had once been so strong, now just echoes of what was. One evening as the sun set, casting long shadows across the living room, Alex and I sat down to talk. The air was heavy, not just with the weight of our past actions, but with the uncertainty of our future. I never wanted this to happen, Alex said, his voice low, his eyes not meeting mine. I didn't mean for us to end up here. I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. I know, Alex. Neither did I. But here we are, and we need to figure out how to move forward. He looked up then, his gaze intense. Do you think we can ever be happy? After all this? The question hung between us, heavy with implications. Could we find happiness in the aftermath of such betrayal? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But I want to try. I want to believe that we can find some peace, some semblance of happiness, even if it's not what we once had. The conversation was the beginning of many, where we slowly peeled back the layers of our guilt, our fears, and our hopes. We talked about Mark, about the life we had before, about the mistakes we made, and the lessons we learned. As time passed, the house began to feel less like a mausoleum of our past, and more like a space where we could start anew. Alex's projects in the garage became less about escape and more about creation, his enthusiasm slowly returning. I started to reclaim the kitchen, cooking not just for sustenance, but for the comfort it brought, a small act of normalcy in our tumultuous life. We ventured out more, facing the community with our heads held high, not defiantly, but with a quiet dignity. The whispers didn't stop, but they began to lose their sting. We found allies in unexpected places, neighbors who had faced their own scandals or heartbreaks, offering nods of understanding rather than judgment. Counseling became our lifeline. It wasn't just about us. It was about understanding ourselves, our desires, and our mistakes. The sessions were raw, filled with tears, apologies, and the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding trust, not just between us but within ourselves. And then there were the moments of connection, fleeting but profound. Like the night when Alex, after a particularly grueling session with our therapist, came into the kitchen where I was making tea. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his presence warm and comforting. We stood there, not speaking, just feeling the heartbeat of the other. A silent promise of trying, of hoping. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the house filled with new sounds. The clatter from the garage was now accompanied by laughter, sometimes forced, sometimes genuine. We started to make new memories slowly, carefully, like gardeners planting seeds in soil that had been scorched. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Alex took my hand. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" he asked, his voice tinged with the vulnerability I had come to cherish. I squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from his work, a testament to his resilience. "I think we're doing what we need to do, to heal, to grow. And yes, I believe we can find happiness, Alex. Not the same as before, but something new, something ours." The night air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming flowers, a sign of spring, of renewal. As I looked at Alex, I saw not just the man who had shared in my betrayal, but someone who was trying just as hard as I was to forge a path through the wreckage of our past. Life isn't just about the choices we make, but also about how we live with the consequences. And as I sit here now reflecting on the past, I realize that our journey, fraught with pain and mistakes, might just lead us to a new kind of happiness, one built on honesty, understanding, and the courage to face our truths. Will Susan and Alex find happiness in their new life together? Only time will tell, but for now we're trying, and in that trying there's a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, and perhaps a new beginning. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.